The sound of glass shattering echoed through the house, yanking me out of a restless sleep. I sat up, heart pounding, and threw on my robe. The clock read 2:17 a.m. I could hear the muffled bass of music and the unmistakable cackle of Laura's laugh. My daughter-in-law was at it again. Not tonight, I muttered to myself as I hurried down the stairs. Robbie's asthma had been acting up, and the last thing he needed was another one of Laura's parties. I pushed open the door to the living room and was met with a scene that made my blood boil. Laura was draped over the arm of the couch, a wine glass dangling precariously from her hand. Her friends, including that no-good Jack, were scattered around the room, oblivious to the mess they were making. "Laura," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "Robbie is trying to sleep. Can you keep it down?" Laura turned her bleary eyes toward me and smirked. "Oh, lighten up, Sarah. It's just a bit of fun." "Fun?" I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "Your son is upstairs struggling to breathe, and you think this is fun?" Jack sauntered over, a smug grin on his face. "Come on, Sarah. Let Laura have her fun. She's been cooped up all week." I glared at him, my fists clenching at my sides. "This is my house, and I will not have you disrespecting my family." Jack's grin widened. "Your house, huh? Funny, I thought Tom paid the bills." Before I could respond, a small, wheezing cough echoed from the top of the stairs. Robbie stood there, clutching his inhaler, his eyes wide with fear. "Grandma," he whispered. "I can't breathe." I rushed to him, scooping him up in my arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. Grandma's here." I shot a final glare at Laura. "This ends now. Get these people out of my house." Laura rolled her eyes but reluctantly stood up. "All right, party's over. Everyone out." As her friends shuffled out the door, I carried Robbie back to his room, settling him into bed and placing his inhaler within reach. His breathing steadied, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Robbie," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I promise I'll make this right." I returned to the living room to find Laura slumped on the couch, a fresh glass of wine in her hand. "You need to get your priorities straight, Laura. Robbie needs you." Laura scoffed. "He has you. What more does he need?" I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me. "He needs his mother. He needs you to be present, to care." Laura's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, perhaps? But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "I'm doing my best, Sarah. It's not easy. Your best isn't good enough," I said softly. "Not for Robbie." With that, I turned and headed back upstairs, my mind racing. I needed to talk to Tom, to make him see what was happening. But he was working another night shift, and I couldn't bear to burden him with this over the phone. As I settled into bed, I felt a knot of worry tighten in my chest. Laura's behavior was getting worse, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. I had to find out what for Robbie's sake. The next morning, I was in the kitchen making breakfast when Tom came home. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "Morning, Mom," he said, dropping his bag by the door. "How's Robbie?" "He's better," I said, handing him a cup of coffee. "But we need to talk about Laura." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "What now?" "She's out of control, Tom. Last night she had another party, and Robbie had an asthma attack." Tom's face hardened. "I'll talk to her. But you know how she is." "That's the problem," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't think you do." I hesitated, knowing that what I was about to say could change everything. "Tom, I think Laura's having an affair." Tom's eyes widened in shock. "What? With who?" "Jack," I said, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. "I saw them together last night. It wasn't just a party. It was more than that." Tom's face went pale, and he sank into a chair. "I can't believe this." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "We need to confront her, Tom. For Robbie's sake." He nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "You're right. This ends now." As we prepared to face Laura, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. This was just the beginning, and I knew things were about to get much worse. But I had to be strong for Robbie, for Tom, and for the family I loved. I stood in the kitchen, hands trembling as I washed the breakfast dishes. Tom had left for work, and Robbie was upstairs resting. The house was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. I knew I had to confront Laura, but the thought of it made my stomach churn. Just as I was drying my hands, the front door creaked open, and Laura stumbled in, looking disheveled and still reeking of alcohol. She shot me a defiant glance as she kicked off her shoes and headed for the stairs. "Laura, we need to talk." I called after her, my voice firmer than I felt. She paused, one hand on the banister, and turned to face me. "What now, Sarah? Can't this wait?" "No, it can't," I replied, stepping closer. "We need to talk about Robbie and your behavior." Laura rolled her eyes and slumped onto the bottom step. "Fine. What do you want to say?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Last night was unacceptable. Robbie had an asthma attack because of your party, and you were too drunk to notice." Laura's eyes narrowed. "I didn't ask you to play babysitter, Sarah. Robbie's my son, and I'll raise him how I see fit." "Raising him?" I scoffed. "You're neglecting him, Laura. He needs stability and care, not loud parties and strangers in the house." Laura's face flushed with anger. "You're overreacting. He's fine." "He's not fine," I shot back. "And neither is your marriage. Tom knows about you and Jack." Her expression shifted from anger to shock, and she stood up, swaying slightly. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Laura. I saw you with him last night. Tom and I both know what's going on." Laura's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then she straightened up, her defiance returning. "You have no right to interfere in my life, Sarah." "I have every right when it comes to Robbie," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I won't let you hurt him." She glared at me, then turned and stormed up the stairs, slamming her bedroom door behind her. I sank into a chair, my heart heavy with worry. This was far from over. Later that day, I called Linda, my eldest daughter, for support. "Linda, I need your help. Things are getting worse with Laura." Linda's voice was calm and reassuring. "I'll be there as soon as I can, Mom. Hang in there." By the time Linda arrived, the tension in the house was palpable. Laura had locked herself in her room, and Robbie was quietly playing in the living room, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Linda hugged me tightly, her presence a balm to my frayed nerves. "What's the plan, Mom?" "We need to get through to Laura," I said, my voice trembling. "For Robbie's sake." Linda nodded, her expression determined. "Let's do this." We headed upstairs and knocked on Laura's door. "Laura, it's Linda. Can we talk?" There was a long silence, and then the door creaked open. Laura stood there, looking defeated. "What do you want?" "We need to figure out a way to help Robbie," Linda said gently. "And to help you." Laura's eyes filled with tears again, and she sank onto the bed. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Linda sat beside her, taking her hand. "You need to get help, Laura. For yourself and for Robbie." Laura looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I don't know how to fix this." "We'll help you," I said softly. "But you have to be willing to change." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I want to. I really do." As we sat there, a tentative truce forming between us, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, and there were still many battles to be fought. That night, as I tucked Robbie into bed, he looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. "Is everything going to be okay, Grandma?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We'll make it okay, sweetheart. I promise." But as I closed his door and headed to my own room, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Laura's tears and promises were a start, but trust had been broken, and healing would take time. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew I had to stay strong. For Robbie, for Tom, and for the family I loved. No matter what came next, we would face it together. The day started off calm, almost deceptively so. I had just finished making breakfast when Robbie came downstairs, looking pale and listless. His breathing was labored, and I felt a pang of worry. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" I asked, placing a gentle hand on his forehead. He felt warm. "Not so good, Grandma," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I glanced at the clock. Tom was still at work, and Laura was nowhere to be found. Panic began to rise in my chest. "Let's get you to the doctor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. As I helped Robbie into his jacket, Laura stumbled through the front door, looking even worse than she had the previous day. "Where are you going?" she slurred, her eyes barely focusing on us. "Robbie needs to see a doctor." I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "You should come with us." Laura shook her head, her expression vacant. "I'm too tired. You go." I didn't have time to argue. I bundled Robbie into the car and sped off to the hospital, my heart pounding with fear. By the time we arrived, Robbie's breathing had worsened, and I could see the strain on his face. The doctors rushed him into the emergency room, and I was left pacing the waiting area, my mind racing with worry. I called Tom, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. "Mom, what's wrong?" Tom's voice was filled with concern. "It's Robbie," I said, my voice breaking. "He's in the hospital. His asthma, it's bad, Tom." "I'm on my way," he said, his voice tight with worry. Hours passed in a blur of anxiety and fear. Finally, a doctor emerged, his expression grave. "Mrs. Reynolds, your grandson is stable, but his condition is serious. He needs to stay overnight for observation." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you, doctor." Tom arrived shortly after, his face etched with worry. "How is he?" "He's stable," I said, my voice trembling. "But it's serious, Tom. We need to talk about Laura." Tom's face hardened. "Not now, Mom. Let's focus on Robbie." I nodded, understanding his need to prioritize our grandson. But I couldn't shake the anger and frustration I felt toward Laura. Her negligence had put Robbie in danger, and I couldn't let it continue. The next morning, as Robbie slept in his hospital bed, I decided to confront Laura once and for all. I called Linda and asked her to meet me at the house. I needed backup. When we arrived, Laura was sitting on the couch, looking more disheveled than ever. "What now?" she muttered, not even bothering to look at us. "Laura, this has to stop," Linda said firmly. "Robbie's in the hospital because of your negligence." Laura's eyes widened in shock. "What? No, that can't be." "It is," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You were too drunk to notice he was struggling to breathe. This is your fault, Laura." Laura's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flicker of remorse. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "But it did," Linda said, her voice softening. "You need help, Laura. For Robbie's sake." Laura looked at us, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to fix this." "We'll help you," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "But you have to be willing to change." She nodded, her expression one of defeat. "I'll try." As we sat there, discussing the steps Laura needed to take, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, and there were still many battles to be fought. That night, as I sat by Robbie's bedside, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Laura's tears and promises were a start, but trust had been broken, and healing would take time. Just as I was about to doze off, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Mom, I just saw Jack leaving Laura's house. Be careful." My heart sank. This was far from over. As I looked at Robbie, sleeping peacefully, I knew I had to stay strong. For him, for Tom, and for the family I loved. No matter what came next, we would face it together. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft hum of the air conditioning. I sat beside Robbie's bed, watching him sleep, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. Tom had gone to grab some coffee, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of Jack leaving our house from my mind. What was he doing there? Had Laura already broken her promise? My heart ached with worry and anger. Just then, Tom walked back in, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He handed one to me and sat down heavily in the chair beside me. "Any change?" he asked, his voice filled with exhaustion. "He's stable," I said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. "But we need to talk, Tom." "About Laura." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mom, I know you're worried, but can we focus on Robbie right now?" "This is about Robbie," I insisted, my voice trembling. "I got a text from Linda last night. She saw Jack leaving our house. Laura's still seeing him." Tom's face went pale, and he set his coffee down, his hands shaking. "What? Are you sure?" "Yes," I said, my voice filled with conviction. "We can't ignore this, Tom. Laura's behavior is putting Robbie in danger." Tom stood up, pacing the small room. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I love Laura, but I can't keep putting Robbie through this. You need to confront her," I said softly. "For Robbie's sake." Tom nodded, his jaw set with determination. "You're right. I'll talk to her." Later that day, Tom and I returned home, leaving Robbie in the capable hands of the hospital staff. As we walked through the door, the tension in the air was palpable. Laura was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Laura, we need to talk," Tom said, his voice strained. Laura looked up, her expression one of defeat. "I know," she whispered. Tom sat down across from her, his face a mask of pain. "I know about Jack. I know you're still seeing him." Laura's eyes widened in shock, and she shook her head. "No, Tom, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Tom demanded, his voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're cheating on me while our son is in the hospital." Laura's face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Tom's face softened, but his eyes were still filled with hurt. "Why, Laura? Why did you do this?" Laura looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she whispered. "I was lonely. I felt like you didn't care anymore." Tom's face twisted with pain. "I care, Laura. I care so much. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep putting Robbie through this." Laura nodded, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I know. I need help, Tom. I want to get better." "We'll help you," I said softly, stepping forward. "But you have to be willing to change." Laura looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "I will. I promise." As we sat there, discussing the steps Laura needed to take, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, and there were still many battles to be fought. The next morning, Tom and I returned to the hospital to find Robbie sitting up in bed, a small smile on his face. "Grandma, Dad!" he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. "Hey, buddy," Tom said, his voice filled with relief. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Robbie said, his smile widening. "Can I come home soon?" "Soon, sweetheart," I said, my heart swelling with love. "But we need to make sure you're completely better first." As we sat with Robbie, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Laura's tears and promises were a start, but trust had been broken, and healing would take time. Just as I was about to leave the room, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Mom, you need to come home. There's something you need to see." My heart sank. This was far from over. As I looked at Robbie, sleeping peacefully, I knew I had to stay strong. For him, for Tom, and for the family I loved. No matter what came next, we would face it together. When I arrived home, Linda was waiting for me on the porch, her face pale. "Mom, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. She led me inside, and my heart stopped when I saw what she was holding. It was a stack of letters, all addressed to Laura, all from Jack. The truth was out, and it was worse than I had imagined. As I looked at the letters, my heart heavy with betrayal, I knew I had to make a decision. This couldn't go on any longer. For Robbie's sake, for Tom's sake, and for the sake of our family, I had to take action. "Linda, call Tom," I said, my voice steady. It's time to end this. The day began with a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. Tom had returned to work, and Robbie was back home, resting in his room. Laura had been uncharacteristically quiet since our confrontation, but I knew better than to trust the calm. I was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, when the phone rang. It was Tom's supervisor. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm afraid Tom's had an accident at work. He's been taken to the hospital." My heart dropped. "Is he okay?" "He's stable, but you should get here as soon as possible." I hung up, my hands trembling. I rushed to Robbie's room. "Sweetheart, I need to go to the hospital. Aunt Linda will come stay with you, okay?" Robbie nodded, his eyes wide with worry. "Is Dad okay?" "He will be," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll be back soon." I called Linda, who promised to come over right away. Then, I hurried to the hospital, my mind racing with fear and worry. When I arrived, Tom was in a hospital bed, his leg in a cast. He looked up at me, his face pale. "Mom, I'm okay. Just a broken leg." I sighed in relief, sitting down beside him. "Thank goodness. How did this happen?" "Slipped on some oil in the warehouse," he said, grimacing. "Doctor says I'll be out of work for a while." "We'll manage," I said, squeezing his hand. "Right now, we need to focus on getting you better." As I sat with Tom, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Mom, Laura's packing up Robbie's things. She says they're going to her parents for New Year's." Panic surged through me. I knew Laura's parents lived hours away, and I couldn't trust her to take care of Robbie. I looked at Tom, who was already struggling to sit up. "Mom, go. Stop her." I nodded, my heart pounding. "I'll be back soon." I raced home, my mind a whirlwind of fear and anger. When I arrived, I found Laura in Robbie's room, shoving clothes into a suitcase. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Laura turned to me, her eyes flashing with defiance. "We're leaving, Sarah. Robbie needs a change of scenery. Robbie needs stability," I snapped. "And he needs his father. You can't just take him away." Laura's face twisted with anger. "I can do whatever I want. He's my son." "Not without Tom's consent," I said firmly. "And he's in the hospital right now. You can't just run away." Laura's eyes filled with tears, and she sank onto the bed. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I can't stay here." "Then go," I said softly. "But leave Robbie with us. He needs to be with his father." Laura shook her head, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I can't leave him." "You already have," I said, my voice breaking. "Every time you chose Jack over your family, you left him." Laura looked up at me, her face a mask of pain. "I don't know how to fix this." "Get help," I said, my voice trembling. "But don't take Robbie away from the people who love him." Laura nodded, her tears falling freely. "Okay, I'll go. But promise me you'll take care of him." "I promise," I said, my heart aching for the broken woman before me. As Laura left, I sat on the bed, my hands shaking. Robbie came in, his eyes wide with confusion. "Grandma, what's happening?" "Your mom's going to get some help," I said, pulling him into a hug. "And you're going to stay here with us." Robbie nodded, his small body trembling. "Okay." That night, as I tucked Robbie into bed, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We had faced another crisis, but we had come through it together. But I knew this was far from over. Laura's departure was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. As I sat by Tom's bedside in the hospital, I knew I had to stay strong. For Robbie, for Tom, and for the family I loved. No matter what came next, we would face it together. Just as I was about to leave the hospital, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Mom, I found something else. You need to see this." My heart sank. What now? As I looked at Tom, sleeping peacefully, I knew I had to stay strong. For him, for Robbie, and for the family I loved. No matter what came next, we would face it together. When I arrived home, Linda was waiting for me on the porch, her face pale. "Mom, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. She led me inside and handed me a folder. Inside were photos, receipts, and letters, all pointing to Laura's continued relationship with Jack. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. As I looked at the evidence, my heart heavy with betrayal, I knew I had to make a decision. This couldn't go on any longer. For Robbie's sake, for Tom's sake, and for the sake of our family, I had to take action. "Linda, call Tom," I said, my voice steady. "It's time to end this." The drive to Linda's house felt like an eternity. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the implications of the folder she had handed me. The evidence of Laura's ongoing affair with Jack was damning, and I knew it would devastate Tom. But I had to stay strong. I had to protect my family. When I arrived, Linda was waiting for me on the porch, her face pale and anxious. "Mom, Bob's inside. He needs to talk to you." I nodded, my heart pounding. As I stepped inside, Bob stood up from the couch, his expression grim. "Grandma, I need to tell you something." "Go on, Bob," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Bob took a deep breath. "I went by your house to check on you, but when I got there, I saw Laura and Jack in the living room. They were together." My stomach churned. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Bob said, his face serious. "I took pictures. I didn't know what else to do." I felt a wave of nausea. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. "Thank you, Bob. You did the right thing." Linda placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Mom, we need to confront Laura. This has to stop." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "You're right. Let's do this." We drove back to the house, the air thick with tension. When we arrived, Laura was in the kitchen, acting as if nothing had happened. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. "Laura," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "What is it now, Sarah?" "I know about you and Jack," I said, my voice steady. "Bob saw you together. He has pictures." Laura's face drained of color. "Sarah, I can explain." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "No more lies. No more excuses. This ends now." Tom walked in, his face pale and drawn. He must have sensed the tension. "What's going on?" I handed him the folder, my heart breaking as he opened it. His face twisted with pain and anger as he saw the evidence. "Laura, how could you?" Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Tom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Tom's voice was cold, his eyes hard. "You betrayed me, Laura. You betrayed our family." Laura sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I know. I need help, Tom. Please, give me another chance." Tom shook his head, his voice filled with pain. "I can't, Laura. Not after this." I stepped forward, my voice trembling with emotion. "Laura, you need to leave. You need to get help, and you need to stay away from Robbie until you do." Laura looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "Please, Sarah, don't take him away from me. You did that yourself," I said softly. "You need to go." Laura sobbed, her face crumpling. "Okay, I'll go." As she left, I felt a wave of relief and sadness. This was not how I wanted things to end, but it was necessary. I turned to Tom, who looked shattered. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice filled with determination. "For Robbie." Tom nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mom." That night, as I sat by Robbie's bedside, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We had faced another crisis, but we had come through it together. But I knew this was far from over. Laura's departure was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. Just as I was about to doze off, my phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Mom, I just saw Jack outside our house. Be careful." My heart sank. This was far from over. As I looked at Robbie, sleeping peacefully, I knew I had to stay strong. For him, for Tom, and for the family I loved. No matter what came next, we would face it together. The next morning, I woke to the sound of frantic knocking on the door. I opened it to find Linda, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Mom, Jack's here. He's causing a scene." I felt a surge of anger and fear. "Stay with Robbie," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll handle this." I stepped outside to find Jack pacing on the porch, his face twisted with anger. "Sarah, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice steady. "Leave Jack. You're not welcome here." Jack's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer. "You think you can just get rid of me? Laura and I have a connection. You can't break that." I felt a surge of anger. "Laura's gone, Jack. And you need to leave, too." Jack's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, Sarah. I'll be back." As he stormed off, I felt a shiver of fear. This was far from over. But as I looked back at the house where my family waited, I knew I had to stay strong. For them, for Robbie, and for the family I loved. No matter what came next, we would face it together. The air was thick with tension as I paced the living room, waiting for Linda and Bob to arrive. Tom was still at the hospital, recovering from his accident, and Robbie was upstairs, blissfully unaware of the turmoil swirling around him. My mind raced, trying to prepare for the confrontation ahead. The doorbell rang, and I hurried to open it. Linda and Bob stepped inside, their faces set with determination. "Are you ready, Mom?" Linda asked, her voice steady. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." We drove to Laura's temporary apartment, the silence in the car heavy with anticipation. When we arrived, I felt a surge of anxiety. This was it. There was no turning back now. We knocked on the door, and after a few moments, Laura opened it, her face pale and drawn. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. "All of us." Laura hesitated, then stepped aside to let us in. As we entered, I could see the remnants of her life scattered around the small apartment. It was a stark reminder of how far things had fallen apart. "What's this about?" Laura asked, her eyes darting between us. "Bob saw you with Jack," Linda said, her voice steady. "We have pictures." "It's over, Laura." Laura's face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I know. I messed up. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't," I said softly. "Not alone. You need help, Laura. Real help." Laura looked up at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "I want to get better. I want to be there for Robbie. Please help me." "We will," I said, my voice trembling. "But you need to understand that things can't go back to the way they were. You need to stay away from Jack, and you need to get professional help." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I will. I promise." As we sat there, discussing the steps Laura needed to take, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, and there were still many battles to be fought. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Jack stormed in, his face twisted with rage. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes blazing. "Get out, Jack," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "You're not welcome here." Jack ignored me, his eyes fixed on Laura. "You think you can just leave me? After everything we've been through?" Laura's face paled, and she stood up, her voice trembling. "Jack, please. Just go." Jack took a step closer, his face contorted with anger. "No, I'm not going anywhere. You're mine, Laura." I felt a surge of protectiveness. "She's not yours, Jack. She never was. Now get out before I call the police." Jack's eyes flicked to me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of uncertainty. But then his anger returned, and he lunged at Laura. "You're coming with me, whether you like it or not." Before I could react, Bob stepped in, grabbing Jack by the arm and shoving him back. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice filled with determination. Jack stumbled, then turned on Bob, his fists clenched. "You little—" "Enough!" Linda shouted, stepping between them. "Jack, if you don't leave right now, we will call the police. And you will regret it." Jack hesitated, his eyes flicking between us. Finally, he spat on the floor and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The room was silent, save for Laura's sobs. I felt a wave of relief and exhaustion wash over me. "It's over," I said softly. "He's gone. Laura collapsed onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "We're here for you," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "But you need to get help, Laura. For Robbie's sake." Laura nodded, her face a mask of determination. "I will. I promise." As we left the apartment, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We had faced another crisis, but we had come through it together. But I knew this was far from over. Laura's journey to recovery would be long and difficult, and there were still many battles to be fought. When we arrived home, I found Tom sitting in the living room, his leg propped up on a pillow. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "It's over," I said, sitting down beside him. "Jack's gone, and Laura's agreed to get help." Tom nodded, his eyes filled with relief. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what we would have done without you." "We're a family," I said, my voice filled with determination. "And we'll get through this together." As I sat there holding Tom's hand, I knew that the worst was yet to come. But I also knew that we would face it together, as a family. No matter what came next, we would stand strong. For Robbie, for Tom, and for the family we loved. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Laura checked herself into a rehabilitation center, and Tom began the process of filing for divorce. It was a painful but necessary step for the sake of our family. I spent most of my time caring for Robbie and supporting Tom, who was still recovering from his accident. The house felt different, quieter, more peaceful, but also tinged with a sadness that was hard to shake. One evening, as I was tucking Robbie into bed, he looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. "Grandma, is Mommy going to be okay?" I sat down beside him, stroking his hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy is getting the help she needs. And we're going to be okay too." Robbie nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Robbie. Always." After putting Robbie to bed, I joined Tom in the living room. He was sitting on the couch, staring at the divorce papers in his hands. "It's hard to believe this is happening," he said, his voice filled with pain. "I know," I replied, sitting down beside him. "But it's the right thing to do. For you, for Robbie, and for Laura." Tom nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mom. I couldn't have done this without you. We're a family," I said, squeezing his hand. "And we'll get through this together." The next few weeks were a blur of court dates, therapy sessions, and family meetings. Laura's absence was felt deeply, but there was also a sense of relief that permeated the house. We were finally moving forward. One afternoon, as I was preparing lunch, the phone rang. It was Laura. "Sarah, can I speak to Robbie?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated, my heart aching. "Laura, I think it's best if you focus on your recovery right now. Robbie needs stability." "I understand," she said, her voice breaking. "But please tell him I love him." "I will," I promised, my voice softening. "Take care of yourself, Laura." As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of closure. Laura was on her path to recovery, and we were on ours. It was time to start rebuilding our lives. The day of the final court hearing arrived, and Tom and I sat in the courtroom, waiting for the judge's decision. Laura was there too, looking healthier and more composed than I had seen her in a long time. The judge reviewed the case and granted the divorce, along with full custody of Robbie to Tom. Laura was given supervised visitation rights, contingent on her continued progress in rehabilitation. As we left the courtroom, Laura approached us, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything." Tom nodded, his face a mix of emotions. "Take care of yourself, Laura." "For Robbie." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I will. I promise." As we walked out of the courthouse, I felt a sense of relief and hope. We had faced the darkest moments of our lives, but we had come through them stronger and more united. Back at home, we began to rebuild our lives. Robbie returned to school, and Tom started physical therapy to regain his strength. Linda and Bob continued to provide unwavering support, and our family began to heal. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I looked at my family, Tom, Robbie, Linda, and Bob, and felt a surge of gratitude. We had been through so much, but we were still standing. We were still a family. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings, they echoed, their faces filled with hope and determination. As I looked at Robbie, laughing and playing with his cousins, I knew that we had made the right choices. We had faced our fears, confronted our demons, and emerged stronger. Our love and resilience had seen us through the darkest times, and we were ready to face whatever the future held. In that moment, I realized that family is not just about blood or shared history. It's about the love, support, and unwavering commitment to one another. It's about standing together in the face of adversity and finding strength in each other. And as I sat there, surrounded by my family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. For Robbie, for Tom, and for the family we loved, we were stronger than ever, and our bond was unbreakable.